Yo, what's up guys? Josh here, back with another video. So today's August 2nd and we're back at Resorts World. There it is. So yeah, we've been here the past few nights. Have been doing well. I think we've been playing well. Finally found a good groove. 9 wins in a row. It's crazy to say. You know, I'm someone who had a 20% win rate before I got coaching and was just used to like losing, right? It's like every time I walked into the poker room, I would walk out empty-handed, or in this case, empty wallet, right? But now it feels good to just be playing right. It feels like this is a game that I'm improving at, just analyzing my play, texting my coach constantly, just even something as little as, oh, did I play this hand right? I feel like his insight, Aero Poker, one of the biggest crushers of 2-5, his insight into the hands is just like super helpful just because I start thinking about poker in a different way than I was before. But yeah, with that being said, let's head on down to the poker room.
So in this first notable hand of the session, it's a pretty crazy one. Under the gun, who's an Israeli player who also had a friend at the table, and the friend was honestly really good. This guy was pretty solid as well. He opens at $10, low jack calls, the button 3-bets to $20, so min clicks it. The small blind calls. I look down at 8-9 suited on the big blind. I make the call as well as the under the gun original raiser. The low jack who originally called the $10 now rips it and goes all in for $120. And clearly this additional $100 is not enough as everyone makes the call. So we go 5 ways to the flop with one person all in of 5-4 jack rainbow. The action checks around. The turn is now a 4 of diamonds, giving me a flush draw. So when the small blind shoves for $158, I go ahead and make the call and the other 2 players get out of the way. The river's an 8 of clubs, and the opponent who shoved shows ace king offsuit. I show my hand, and we take it down. So yeah, this was a pretty insane hand. You could argue that like my 8-9 suited call was pretty bad to the 3-bet. I could have just folded and saved $100. However, I just felt like suited connector with a bunch of money in the middle. I just couldn't find the fold button. But yeah, this session will be one where, to be honest, I luck boxed this session. I don't think this was skill, but yeah, just a quick disclaimer before I review the other hands. And happy to take down this massive pot pretty early in the session. All right, so in this second hand, I had made a table change because I wanted to escape the Israeli player. Not the guy who opened, but his friend, just because I felt like he was a shark. He definitely plays higher stakes, and I remember asking like why Israeli players are so good at poker, and he was telling me that all they do is play poker over there, probably online, I'm assuming, because they don't really have casinos. But yeah, ironically, he like also table changed away from that table. I will say like the table we moved to seemed a little better. It felt like the players weren't as good, just because that first table honestly like was pretty tough. It was definitely not an easy lineup. But yeah, basically in the first notable hand since table changing, there was actually a girl, like a Vietnamese girl, who just sat down, who was really drunk, and her friends were like watching her play. But yeah, she was like really drunk. And one thing I want to know is there was an earlier hand where she was in with one StarCraft nerd from an earlier episode. She basically opened, he 3-bet, she 4-bet, and then he jammed. And she had pocket 7s, he had pocket aces, and of course he won. He was later trying to argue with me that that wasn't a bad play, and I'm just like, what in the world? Like, you don't really go in all in with the $400, you know, she had a max buy-in of $400. So I just wanted to point that out as an important piece of information before I dive into this hand. So under the gun limps, I opened for $16, the hijack calls, the cutoff who's the solid Israeli player I was talking about, not the guy from the last hand, but his friend, he 3-bets to $75. The button makes the call, who's the drunk girl, and then the small blind, big blind, and under the gun get out of the way. I make the call, and then the hijack who called the raise folds to the 3-bet. So we're going 3 ways to the flop of queen 9-10, 2 clubs. Super wet board, but I did flop bottom 2 pair. But I go ahead and check. The cutoff c-bets for $50. The drunk girl now shoves for $343. And I just snap call because for whatever reason in my head, I thought she had a flush draw. So yeah, I just snap call thinking I'm good. And then the cutoff folds. Turn is one of the worst cards in the deck. It's an ace of spades, so I'm losing to king jack, which I already was losing to before, as well as ace queen, ace 10, ace 9. List goes on and on. And the river card is the 7 of hearts. And yeah, she tables the nuts on the flop. She had king jack offsuit, so she flopped the nut straight. And then this hand actually spurred like a needle from the fucking StarCraft nerd who for the next 5 hours, I was like literally playing with the same guy for like 5 or 6 hours. He was trying to get me to admit that like I made a terrible play. And then he was also trying to justify why her pocket sevens versus aces hand wasn't a bad move. But I later figured out that I feel like this guy had a crush on this girl. I played with him before and I thought he had like a girlfriend, but apparently not. And then he was like getting some action from this girl. He's like, oh yeah, she's like touching me. And I'm just like, okay, did you get her number? And then he's like, no, whatever. This is like totally irrelevant to the vlog. But anyways, this hand in particular like spurred a bunch of needles from the other guy for the rest of the session. So yeah, long story short, I'm curious what you guys think. Did I just completely overplay this hand? Against any other player, I probably would have been able to fold, but I just felt like against this girl, especially with her drunk image, I just snap called. However, I have noticed that in general, against like drunk players, loose players, like more maniac type of players, I have a hard time reading them and I tend to make mistakes more often than not. So kind of curious if you guys have any tips on how you guys deal with these type of players. I know Coach Arrow says the way you outplay people who play too many hands is by playing better hands than them, which is actually just playing tighter versus trying to play worse hands and outplay them, I guess. So yeah, curious to hear what you guys have to say. All right, so in this next hand, the button straddles on for $6. The low jack opens to $25. I look down at king queen offsuit, so I call from the cutoff. The button straddler defends and the small blind calls as well. Going 5 ways to the flop of 8-2-6 rainbow. Action checks around. The turn is out of 5 clubs, making this board more wet. Everyone checks around again. The river is now at 3 hearts, so when the small blind and low jack both check to me, I feel like everyone's disinterested in the pot, and I'm still kind of tilted from the other hand where I was like up quite a bit early in the session, then I donated to the drunk girl. So I go ahead and just bet $200, a massive overbet, and it does the job as everyone gets out of the way. Okay, so at this point in the session, this girl is like getting increasingly more drunk, the one that I donated to, and we look down at pocket kings in the hijack. So when she limps, I go ahead and limp to set the trap, which I know you guys are gonna say in the comments I limp re-raise too much, which looking back at these hand replays, I'm pretty sure I like limp re-raise kings and aces more often than 3-bet. Which is like so bad, like that's like not profitable in the long run, so I need to actually fix that. But luckily the cutoff helps me spring the trap as he bumps it up to $15. The button, small blind, and under the gun all call to $15. And then I go ahead and 3-bet to $100. Really just to isolate that drunk girl. Everyone gets out of the way, and then the action is back on the drunk girl and under the gun. Okay, at this point, she's like so drunk, she's like on the table, like can't really like act. She doesn't really know it's her turn. She's just laying there. The poker room manager is watching the table, ready to like tell her to leave, which she does after this hand. But you know, I'm over here just sitting in my chair, like hoping she just, you know, throws in like one chip over the line. It's so fucked, but like I was honestly just trying to get my money back from her. And luckily she does make the call. The flop is 4-6-9, 2 clubs, and I don't have any clubs in my hand. So when she checks over to me, I go ahead and bet $200, and then she quickly just folds. So at least I was able to get a little bit of a rebate, although I think against that particular player, she came out on top against me. But yeah, after this table, the poker room manager brought her rack, and then, you know, she left. And of course, the StarCraft nerd didn't get her number. Just pointing that out. If you're gonna hit on a girl at the table or like try to make a move, like, you know, always get the number, right? So yeah, on to the next hand. All right, in this next hand, we're under the gun with pocket rockets and we limp. Like, this is so bad. I'm honestly realizing a lot of mistakes I'm making. Not only just making these videos, but honestly reading your guys' comments. So keep leaving the comments down below. Even though I'm winning some of these sessions, it's a lot due to just running well. It's not actually me playing well. So yeah, I limp again, hoping that someone raises, but unfortunately no one raises. The small blind calls, and then the big blind, who's a StarCraft nerd, checks his option. The flop comes 6-4 king rainbow. So this is actually a decent board for us. We have an overpair. Small blind checks. The StarCraft nerd bets $6, and then I bump it up to $15, and both players make the call. And then one thing to note is this small blind is also like an Israeli guy, so I guess he was also friends with the other two. And it was pretty funny since the StarCraft nerd person is, I guess, like knows Hebrew, and he was like trying to talk to them in Israeli, but it was after he like called a clock on the guy who's actually good, like the the Israeli guy was trying to get away from with the table change. He like called the clock after like 5 seconds and then thought he was like in the right. So yeah, in general, like I noticed in poker, you face like a ton of different personalities, and sometimes you just face these guys who are just like know-it-alls and have like very whatchamacallit. The best way to describe these guys are like, if you imagine the feeling of a nail on the chalkboard, like when you hear that sound, you can just like condense that into a personality, and that perfectly sums up the StarCraft guy. He's just always trying to argue and thinks he's right. He's like, oh, I'll give you like lessons after that, 9-10 suited hand. I was like, what the fuck? But whatever. All right, I keep going on a side tangent. There's just like so many characters from this one session. But yeah, basically the turn comes the 3 of clubs. So both players check over to me. I continue for $30, and then only the small blind makes the call. The river's a king of clubs, now making any king beat me. And when the small blind checks over to me, I down bet to $20. And then the small blind was actually trying to go all in for like 120 something, but he didn't announce it, so he just made the call. And then he shows king 8 offsuit for the river trips, and we lose this one. Another reason why it's just better to, play aces like a normal person instead of being all like tricky. I think one thing I've learned in my time as a poker grinder is slow playing just doesn't work out most of the time, and then the few times it does work out, it's like not as exciting as it seems. Like, I think in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh, it's like gonna be really tricky and I'm gonna outplay people, but then like, this game isn't won off of like one hand. It's a marathon, and I think I need to remember that every single hand I play, I gotta just make the best decision possible, and then in the long run, I'll be a winning player. All right, this next hand's a bit of a weird one. I'm in the button straddle. The hijack, who's the solid Israeli player, calls the $6. I look down at ace king suited on the button, so I bump it up to $20. The big blind calls, and then the hijack, who originally limped, he now limp re-raises to $121, which is quite sizable. It seems like he's trying to steal the pot. However, with such a strong hand as ace king suited, I just make the call, and then the big blind gets out of the way. The flop comes 5 jack 9 rainbow, and the action goes check check. The turn comes 2 of clubs, and the action goes check check again. The river's a 10 of diamond, and the action checks around a 3rd time. My opponent shows ace king offsuit, and we chop this pot. Now this was a weird hand because I felt like I probably could have fired a bet and tried to steal the pot since I was in position, perhaps on the turn, or even on the flop, but he might have stuck around. And in hindsight, I also could have found a 4-bet shove with ace king suited, just because it is a strong hand. However, if I'm up against any pair, I'm basically just flipping, so I'm not sure if 4-bet shoving is the right move here. But yeah, curious about this hand. I mainly wanted to include it in the vlog to see if you guys had any feedback on how I could have played it differently. Alright, so in this next hand, I'm under the gun and I have to straddle the $6. This was like one of the sessions where I felt like I was just playing, honestly, not that well in terms of like trying to be a profitable grinder. I was way too loose, as you're going to see in the next hand after this one. And I'm also straddling, which I realized there's a positive correlation between my straddle frequency and how loose I play, and more gambly as opposed to positive EV. But anyways, I'm under the gun straddle for $6. The button, small blind, and big blind all make the call. I go ahead and bump it up to $20 when I look down at pocket 10s, and everyone comes along. The flop comes jack 2-3 rainbow, so when the 2 blinds check over to me, I go ahead and continue for $30, which is around a 3rd pot, and then only the solid Israeli player on the button makes the call. The turn's a 4 of spades, now putting a spade draw on board, and I go ahead and slow down now, just because I could very well be beat if the person has a jack. And then the Israeli player smells my weakness and bets out $90, which is over a half pot size bet. And I probably could have found the fold here, to be honest, looking back at this hand. However, in the moment, there's no fold button in sight, and I go ahead and make the call. The river's now king of clubs, so now we lose to any jack, club, or set, perhaps even some straight combinations. And I go ahead and check once more, and the button now fires out a bet of $285, which is a near pot size bet, and it puts me in the blender because I'm thinking of hero calling it down. However, I honestly don't really beat too much. Like, most draws get there if you had like an open-ended straight draw or like a wheel draw, like ace-5, and then any overcard beats me if he hits the pair with a jack or king. So I eventually am able to lay this one down, but this was one of those hands where I just felt like I got bluffed because of the sizing. And also this player is definitely capable of bluffing. So I'm kind of curious what you guys think. Looking back at this hand, I would have liked if I just folded on the turn and then found a better hand to play this guy on. Sometimes in the moment I forget that, you know, you're gonna play more hands after this, so it's better just to choose your spots in terms of when to put your money in. And then I get in this mode where I want to take down every single pot and like battle against good players. But the reality is there's gonna be plenty of spots in the future that I can take down, which are much more profitable than this one. All right, so you guys know how I gave you guys a preface that this session is not profitable play? Well, these next few hands kind of sum it up pretty nicely that I was just running well. And Coach Arrow, if you're watching this, let's just you know, skip the rest of this video. But anyways, this is not endorsed by Coach Arrow. This is just me being a degen. I'm on the button straddle again for $6. The hijack and cutoff both make the call. The hijack being the solid Israeli player. I bump it up to $25 with Jack 3 suited. Why I did this, I have no fucking idea, but I do. The hijack and cutoff both come along. The flop comes 3 king ace, rainbow, so we flop bottom pair. The hijack checks. The cutoff now bets $25, and then I make the call with a pair, and the hijack also sticks around. The turn is a 2 of spades, and both players check over to me, and I go ahead and bet $120, just trying to steal the pot. But then both players think about it and then make the call. The river is a 3 of diamonds, now giving me a miracle trips. So when the hijack check over to me, I go ahead and go all in for $282. The hijack, who's a solid Israeli player, gets out of the way. And then the cutoff, who actually was playing pretty tight and usually had like solid hands, he makes the call. So he probably had like, at the very least, an ace. Perhaps he had 2 pair. But he definitely had me crushed until the river. And then I show my hand and we're good. The funny thing is, looking back at this hand, I didn't realize this in the moment, but you can hear the audio of the Israeli guy and he's just like, why do you have a 3 there? Like, you can just hear the audio and it was pretty funny.
Sure.
Got lucky.
What are you doing for free over there?
I'm straddle, bro. I'm straddle.
Like, I should never have a 3 here, the way the action plays out. It's just such a weird line. But yeah, this is basically just like a donkey play, but I got lucky. And yeah, this is not a profitable play. I honestly look at this hand and I'm not proud of it. It's actually quite embarrassing. And you guys can feel free to roast me in the comments down below. All right, this next hand is also one I'm not proud of looking back. And I have no idea how I won this hand. But anyways. So in this hand, I'm in the hijack with 5-2 suited. The low jack to my right limps. I go ahead and limp as well, and so did the cutoff and button. The small blind bumps up to $21, and all of us limpers make the call. The flop comes 8-5-2 with a spade draw on board, so we flop bottom 2 pair. The small blind, who's the original raiser, checks, and then the low jack to my direct right bets $35, and with bottom 2 pair, I go ahead and make the call, while everyone else gets out of the way. The turn is a 3 of diamonds, making this board a bit more connected, and the low jack continues for $75, and I go ahead and make the call. The river is now a 5 of diamonds, giving us a boat. So when the low jack continues for $100, I go ahead and raise it to $400, putting him effectively all in. And he does a mini tank, but then eventually folds. Looking back at this hand, let's say like we ignore the fact that I should never be in this hand in the first place. I should have raised on the flop because I feel like bottom 2 pair as well as bottom set and even middle set can be very vulnerable, especially when there's a flush draw on board. And if the person was sitting on a flush draw, I need to make sure I give him bad odds to call. So I misplayed this hand on multiple streets, probably every street except for the river where I raised when I had the boat. But I wouldn't even call that good poke. Like when you have a nutted hand, it's pretty easy to play. So yeah, I'm not happy with this play at all. Even though I won the hand, I think this session in general was not one that was like positive EV play. It was just me getting lucky with my donkey plays. So in one of the last notable hands of the session, the under the gun opens at $25 who we played with. We have a history with this guy and we know how he plays for the most part. He's like an older guy. He's not really an old man coffee. I would say he's definitely an old man, but he definitely plays hands. So I've seen it run it up. It's like, for some reason, this guy always has the nuts when people like shove into him. Seen it on multiple occasions across different sessions, but anyways, he bumps it to $25, which is a large raise. So I put him on like a high pocket pair. The small blind calls, and then I look down at 4-3 suited in the big blind, so I go ahead and defend. The flop comes 6 jack ace, all diamonds, so we flop a flush, a baby flush though. So the small blind checks. I go ahead and check, plenty to check raise. Under the gun bets $25. The small blind calls, and then I bump it up to $80. And then both players decide to come along. The turn is now 3 of spades, which doesn't really change too much here. So when the small blind checks, I go ahead and bet $220, which is a 2/3 pot size bet. Assuming that he's on a high diamond, like let's say a large pocket pair with 1 diamond. And then the original raiser thinks about it and makes the call while the small blind gets out of the way. The river is now 4 of hearts, so the flush draw bricks if you had 1 diamond. I didn't think he had a bigger flush than me at this point, just given the way he was making his decisions and how the action played out. I felt like had he had a bigger flush, he would have re-raised my raise on the flop. And so knowing that I'm pretty much good here, I go ahead and just shove for $500, which is less than the pot size bet. And then he just folds face up, pocket kings with the king of diamonds. So my read on him was correct on this one. The reason I called from the big blind on this hand was just because I knew that if I hit a flush, I could get paid out from him. So it definitely worked out in this case. We were also short-handed as well, so that's another reason my range was a bit wider. But in all honesty, I was just very gambly this session. So yeah, playing very loosey-goosey and fortunately hitting the cards. And then in this final hand, it's basically, I honestly didn't record how we got there, but I just want to showcase I made a hero call. But I did have a set of 9, so I don't even know if it's a hero call, but basically this guy, like, he basically overbet jammed on the river when I checked to him. And yeah, there was like a heart draw out there, so he could have had a flush, or he could have had a straight as well because it was super connected. But yeah, it was one of those situations where I felt like because I was running well, I was also like not as scared of making this type of call. And I've made nittier folds, right? But it's kind of hard to fold a set as well. So, but yeah, that pretty much concludes this session. It was an absolute marathon session, as you're gonna see in the outro, like 13 hours, I believe. And started out up a lot, then I went down a lot. Started out up with that 8-9 suited hand, which was one of the first hands I played. And then I donated back my profits and more to the drunk girl. And then I was able to run it up after the Jack 3 suited hand where I got lucky on the river with trips. And then just ran well. I feel like towards the end, I was just getting cards, connecting with the board, and then getting paid. So I will say that this session is very reminiscent of how I used to play before I got coaching from Coach Arrow, where I'll be way too loose and aggressive. And when I hit my cards, I would run well, and then more often than not, I would lose because I'm not making positive EV plays. I'm just essentially gambling, right? So got lucky on this one, but I wouldn't attribute it to good poker.
Yo, what's up guys? So we just finished our session. One hell of a session, absolute roller coaster. Let me just get in the car because we got our biggest winning session, so don't want to reveal the numbers in public. But as you can see, it's bright outside right now. It's like a little past 11, grinded for 11 hours. Yeah, one hell of a session, honestly. I feel like at times I wasn't playing that well. Like I made a freaking snap call into the nuts against that drunk lady. And then other times I felt like I got really lucky where I was trying to run a bluff and then hit trips on the river with Jack 3 suited on the straddle. So yeah, I feel like those two moments were pivotal. Like one could have tilted me, but I've made sure to not let it tilt me, which was running the hand into the drunk girl. And then, you know, the Jack 3 suited, I kind of just went for it, got lucky on the river, and then just started playing better, right? So I feel like a huge roller coaster session considering I played 11 hours, so just played a lot of hands. Yeah, I was too loose at parts, but at the same time, I also got paid off at parts, maybe because I was too loose. So overall, just given how long I played for, I'm like pretty content with how I played. So into the game for $454 and out of the game for $17.89 for a profit of $13.35. So that's a new record for the season. Biggest win not at the Win, but at Resorts World. And yeah, it's pretty crazy just because I used to be such a losing player at Resorts World. Every time I came here, I'd just lose like multiple buy-ins. But today I was able to play for a super long session and come out on top profitable for the 10th win in a row, right? Like this is like big news for me. Sure, I'm like probably running good and doing well, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying my best just to play, you know, positive EV spots as much as possible without being too like loose when I'm up, and just staying disciplined, right? So the coaching with Aero Poker definitely helps a lot. Just basically he teaches me what's like good and bad. It sounds super simple, but I felt like before I got coaching, I didn't really have a concept of like when to like bet certain sizing and all of these like nuanced decision-making variables, I guess. Dude, I'm not even coherent right now. Like I need to go to sleep, but yeah, anyways, I feel like just having Coach Aero in my corner has helped me a lot in terms of making better plays and just having confidence in my game, and just having like a person to turn to when I have questions about hands and stuff. So looking to keep up the win streak. Next session, hopefully number 11, but that's gonna wrap up this video. Thanks for everyone who's shown support so far, and let me know what you guys think down below. Love to hear from you guys, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.